and welcome back again from the break. I'm very sorry that it has been longer than we anticipated, and that's actually our CHA statement to the bias that internet connectivity problems are always to be found in the global south. Actually, we had some severe issues here in Berlin today, but I hope you took this as an opportunity to stretch your legs a little bit and get some fresh air, because we are now diving deep into a core issue of the Grand Bargain, namely to strengthen locally led humanitarian assistance. Honoring the so-called localization commitment, many international organizations are currently adapting their approaches to operational humanitarian assistance, including their presence on the ground. Aiming to give more decision-making power to their local and national counterparts, some are decentralizing their work and build new southern-based networks. Others are developing exit plans and ultimately pull out of operational work, hence giving more space to genuine southern-based NGOs. Doing so, we already see that many international organizations have a variety of different approaches to localization. And I'm very happy that I'm joined today by a dedicated group of experts from different local organizations, from different geographical contexts in the Global South, to share their views on their international organizations' counterparts' approaches to localization. But before I present the panel, let me quickly introduce some housekeeping rules again. So if you are joining us on Zoom today, please keep your camera and microphone switched off. However, of course, all of your comments, questions and inputs are highly welcome. My colleague Andrea will monitor the chat, and she'll have the opportunity to feed your inputs into our panel discussion later in the Q&A session today. If you feel inspired to engage in more discussion and if you want to network among your peers, you can do so with using our Slack channel that we put up for you. Please use them widely, as they will be available also after this panel has closed and during the breaks, and even after the conference has come to an end tomorrow. Last but not least, we are again lucky to have Nicoline with us here today. She is joining us from South Africa and enlightening us with some of her fabulous graphic recordings, which we will share from time to time in the panel. So Nicoline, thank you for being here with us today again. Now, let me introduce our wonderful panel. First of all, I am joined today by Sema Genel Karaosmanoğlu, who has been working in the field of international humanitarian aid and development for over 23 years now. She has carried out project work in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran, and now focuses on work inside Turkey. Sema has worked as a consultant for several international development and humanitarian agencies. However, in 2005, she became the founding member and director of Support to Life, which is a humanitarian aid organization with headquarters in Istanbul, in Turkey. STL is doing emergency relief and recovery, as well as protection and resilience work for displaced populations. In addition, she has a PhD in political science and public administration, and hence she has also lectured in several universities in Istanbul. Given her vast experience in humanitarian action, she leads discussions on the localization of aid and the role of national actors therein. Next to Sema, we will have Ahmed Ibrahim Abdi here with us today, who has over 30 years of experience in humanitarian, government, and development work. He is a passionate local and global champion of the localization agenda and climate finance, and he is also an advocate for a systems approach to predictable shock responsive social protection to enable resilience of disaster-prone communities. He has held senior positions in various international organizations. However, as a chief executive officer of ALDEV and the convener of AZAL, a humanitarian network for local and national agencies in Kenya, he has himself now localized to walk the talk. Finally, we are joined by Nkese Maria Udongwo, who has over 10 years of working experience as a humanitarian and development professional in Nigeria and the UK. She currently works for Caritas Nigeria as a director of humanitarian services, overseeing a wide portfolio of multisexual humanitarian interventions across Nigeria. She champions the localization agenda through advocacies, serving in localization steering committees, and of course also speaking in national and global conferences like ours here today. Additionally, Nkese is co-chair of the National Localization Working Group in Nigeria and serves as a trustee of the Women in Humanitarian Response Initiative in Nigeria. Thank you for being here with us today and being so patient with our technical issues. A warm welcome to all of you. Now, to start the discussion, may I ask all of you to give us a brief 5 minutes input on your thoughts on how you see your international partners' approaches to localization. How do these play out in your practical day-to-day work and your cooperation with them? Sema, do you want to start?
Okay, I think I have unmuted myself. Thanks a lot, Darina, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Sema, and I'm the director of Support to Life, a humanitarian organization headquartered in Istanbul, in Turkey. I thought I would share today my experiences throughout my career as a humanitarian worker, because we have worked with a wide variety of INGOs, intermediaries. So I just wanted to share that experience in my opening remarks. So as Support to Life, we were established in 2005 by a group of 5 women founders. And I have been with Support to Life for 16 years. But before that, I worked for another Ankara-based Turkish NGO for 8 years. So personally speaking, I have been engaged in the humanitarian sphere for 24 years and only with local organizations. So it so happened that for the first 16 years of my engagement in humanitarian work, my organization partnered with faith-based organizations. Diakonie Katastrophenhilfe, Caritas Germany, Caritas Switzerland, Hex, APR, Malteser, just to name a few of them. And not because we were faith-based ourselves as Support to Life, but it just so happened that our connections and our networks brought us together with these particular INGOs. Now, it was, of course, much later that I came to realize how fortunate this was. And I appreciated the fact, because these were all INGOs that had no implementing capacity themselves and worked only through partners. So this meant that at a time of crisis, from the decision to intervene, to the assessment of needs, to the design of the intervention, to the implementation, to the monitoring and evaluation of impacts, my organization led the process, and we had the final say. So with these same INGO partners, we worked for many years with populations affected by natural disasters. The 99 Marmara earthquake, maybe some of you know in Turkey, was my first major relief operation. We worked with refugees in Turkey from the crisis in the Balkans. We worked with communities that were displaced due to the armed conflict in southeastern Turkey in the Kurdish areas. So quite a range of activities and programs that we ran. As crises broke out in the neighboring countries, we found ourselves as SDL also supporting relief operations overseas. We supported again with our very same INGO partners in identifying local partners, in starting the relief efforts in other countries where they had no local contacts. This included working in Afghanistan after 9/11, in Iran after the Bam earthquake, and it included working in Pakistan after the Kashmir earthquake. So at the time, it was very clear that our role as the Turkish intermediary was to help identify local partners and to work with them one-on-one, side-by-side, mentoring to help them adapt their approach and systems to emergency response. Most of them were community-based organizations, as well as provide project supervision and compliance support to help them fulfill back donor rules and regulations in cases where third-party funding was available. So being engaged in this type of a partnership, which we later called a strategic partnership, at the time we neither questioned nor valued or appreciated the fact that this was indeed a very special way of partnering. And for the first 16 years of my career as a humanitarian worker, I thought this was how the humanitarian system worked. But it wasn't until the Syria crisis broke out, refugees started crossing into Turkey, and many INGOs flocked the country, that we realized that this is in fact not the way the humanitarian system operates. The partnerships we had cherished for 16 years with our INGO partners, we realized was in fact quite marginal. So as a great diversity of INGOs started arriving in Turkey and approached us for partnership, that was when we started seeing the bigger picture. INGOs, that have a model of own implementation have a completely different approach to partnering with locals. As we started partnering with INGOs, such as MSF, DRC, Goal, Concern, Save the Children, we were exposed to the greater diversity of INGOs out there, most of them accustomed to implementing themselves rather than partnering with locals. And on top of that, we worked directly with government intermediaries such as GIZ and SDC and with many UN agencies. So as a result, we came to understand the wide range of partnerships that are out there, from empowering strategic partnerships on the one extreme to those that are based more on subcontracting arrangements on the other extreme. And in the latter case, the quality of our partnerships significantly deteriorated. The risks we took on significantly increased. And it was our experience with these recent INGO and UN partnerships that as STL, we felt the strong urge to be engaged in discussions on localization. So I'll leave it at that. I know I'm over time for my opening remarks.
Thank you, Sema. Very insightful. Now, Ahmed, may I turn over to you? You are working for a local or a national organization in Kenya. What are your experience with your international partners?
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. Here, ALDEF Kenya started off as a voluntary organization way back in the early 90s, 1990 specifically, in response to a drought crisis. And that started off more like a voluntary organization, doing community-based processes, doing local fundraising, being able to do response at first level together with the community. Over time, we started partnering with organizations that came into the area, and started off only from an approach where we are engaged in the social aspects, community mobilization and targeting processes. And that transformed step by step into where now we were able to be part of the proposals, we were part to be able to do the part of the implementation, to a level where now we have been handed over the partnership of really, and they have pulled out some of them. And that has really helped us to grow into a vibrant and stronger organization. However, that made us shed the aspects which we are now really looking down again on the localization or where we do local fundraising, where we engage in everything and do it from a locally based model. However, in these new partnerships, which now we have now started wearing, which is more of accountable upwards rather than accountable downwards, it has created an approach where you're a bit aloof, as to say, because of the level of engagement in the paperwork, in the documentation, in the processes that are really around the actual perspective. In time, we have also developed mechanisms in which we have come together as local partners when we realized things have in this way. And in Kenya, for your information, the government has now decentralized 47 units of devolved government, and now service delivery is able to go down to the grassroots where public participation and engagement is really happening. So the space in which local actors and international actors are working in Kenya, which has become a low middle-income country, has shrunk. And from that perspective, based on the 2016 grand bargain commitments and signing up, we are seeing quite a number of international organizations who are also localizing, forming affiliates in the country, and that brings in the extra level. But however, in the programming approach of empowerment and engagement, we have seen an example is the empowering local and national organizations or humanitarian organizations project, which is called ELNA, which is supported through the Oxfams, where we have designed the program from the beginning to the end. We're able to do the processes together with the community setups, do the RTRs, to be able to do this kind of processes on our own and be able to really do that. And technically speaking, having now localized myself from being an associate country director of an international organization, the skills did not really lack. So what was the real key thing that was really required on the ground was the ability to be able to give the local organizations the capacity to be able to provide to the local needs, the partnerships that were required really to really do the response so well, and thirdly, the participation revolution perspective, which the local organizations are so well in doing. So the way I see the international partnerships should be able to be engaging with these kinds of things is in a way of dealing with the enabling environment, which it's, in my view, is more from the funding, the coordinated processes, and the policies that are right to be able to do a proper response at a country level, which is low middle income country, which now puts the government together on the seat because they are the duty bearers and they are the ones who are supposed to be the first ones. And the humanitarian system works in gap filling, and then the visibility and all these processes really work around an enabling approach, which is now led by locals. If that is achieved, then the humanitarian system will really be able to function for the people in crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Again, very useful insights that we will tackle in our panel discussion later. May I turn now to you, Nkese, for your 5 minutes input. You work for Caritas Nigeria and are hence connected with a wide relief network from the Catholic Church. So do your experience differ though?
Okay, thank you very much. I work with Caritas Nigeria, and Caritas Nigeria is owned by the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria. As such, we also try to link up with other sister Caritas in other countries. Caritas Nigeria was established in 2010, just before the large outset of the humanitarian crisis in Nigeria. And basically, we were dealing with smaller humanitarian crises from funds, locally raised funds from the Catholic Church to reach out to people irrespective of faith, irrespective of their religion, their creed, or where they are from, and irrespective of gender. So we were actually set up to help coordinate the diocesan Caritas, as the local Caritas in every nook and cranny of the 56 dioceses in Nigeria. And so the main essence was to help coordinate humanitarian work on behalf of the Catholic Church in Nigeria and be able to strengthen the capacity and the institutions of the local Caritas in every single diocese, which also passes down to the parishes. Now, in Caritas Nigeria, we had been raising funds even before the big international funding came in, and then we had the influx of INGOs. We had been raising funds to intervene in crisis in Nigeria, as well as also raising funds to help out in other countries as much as we could. And we try to partner with other sister Caritas to help build our capacity. And sometimes when there are large humanitarian crises and the local funds could not cover it, we reached out to Caritas Internationalis, requesting that we would like to launch an emergency appeal, in which case it's published. And so the Caritas of other countries that are interested or would want to express solidarity could also contribute to a pool of funds that is used in intervening in our crisis. Going forward, we have been working in the Northeast and in other parts of Nigeria where we have now large-scale and protracted humanitarian crisis. The aspect of localization in Nigeria has been kind of, most organizations have not actually been walking the talk. So we see situations where some INGOs from their headquarters would talk about localization and have very excellent blueprints on localization in their documents, but in their country offices, this is not actually being implemented. And we also see a few other INGOs that actually walk the talk, and this has to do with continuous orientation of the field staff. So like we have some of our partners who, when they're having trainings, they could invite us, okay, we are having capacity building for some of our staff on ABCD thing. Could you send maybe 2 of your staff so that they could join our staff? And that is what I call real localization. You have localization where you're trying to develop some policies and you reach out to a big INGO. Oh, please, we are trying to develop policies in this aspect. Could you send someone to come and be part of the committee that we are trying to develop these policies? Could you also share some of your policy documents so that we could use that as a guide? And that has been very helpful to us. So that's how we see localization here. It's not been a straight-cut way. There are many organizations that are actually doing it, and there are also very many that are not really walking the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkese. And with that, we have finished our quick introduction round from the panels. But before I introduce my questions to all of you, I would like to give you, all the 3 of you, the opportunity, if you want to react directly to something that your fellow panelist has just said that maybe relates with your experiences. Anybody who feels that he or she wants to jump on something? Okay. All right. If that's not the case, Ahmed?
I just add, initially, I just gave a 2-3 minute talk line. So sure. In 2 minutes, I just wanted to add that in terms of now partnerships, we have seen partnerships which have been enabling. They have grown from a level where in the proposals, the actual partner portions are clearly marked in as they are sent out to donors. They are clearly mentioned in the process, and the process of formulating them is clear. So at the field level and in terms of implementation, we have used a more local-led approach where accompaniment of technical expertise is what we have been using of recent times with some of our key partners. Some of the partners we have also been able to push the agenda where we are able to, we came up as as a network of local organizations. We are 30 in number. I host it and convene it. We work in 12 counties in Kenya out of the 47, which are mostly arid and semi-arid counties. From this approach, what we do is we are able to take the localization agenda a step higher and a notch higher by taking it closer to the other actors. So how we do it is we say we're able to have this number of organizations with this kind of expertise that can be able to provide a networked kind of a response to give you the able geographical spread and the scale to be able to impact at scale. So based on this, the network is already hosted, and then we become partners of consortiums of international organizations and present ourselves in a way to be able to sell. And in this way, each of the local partners is asked to talk to its key international partner so that we can get anticipatory funds, no regret funds, to be able to do a response on our own at first hand. And that has really worked, where now the international partners help us to. And in the end, the basis that was set for this early action becomes the basis to do a scaled up response in the end. Both has happened in 2019 drought. It has happened in the locust 2020 locust response. And that has really been great. Seeing institutional funding coming through, where ECHO was able to give to Kenya Cash Consortium, and we were able to reach in each of the different times more than 20,000 households through cash transfers in more than 8 to 10 counties in northern Kenya.
Wow, that's great. This is actually highlighting the importance of networking also among diverse local and national organizations. What I take from here is that there is diverse experience, good ones and not so good ones. So I'm asking myself, to your experience, what do you think are the hindrances, the blockages that block those INGOs that are not walking the talk, as we just heard, or like Smoothie just said in the first panel, the plane has not really taken off. So can you think of some hindrances that keep INGOs away from taking on a more facilitative, more supporting role? Sema, do you want? Nkese, yeah?
Yeah, right from the top of my head, I could quickly just say there's a lot of competition in the field, competition for funds. So the INGO that is registered, for instance, say in Nigeria, has an office here, has staff, and they're trying to maintain the office, they're trying to pay the staff salary, and they're trying to generate as many projects as possible so as to build up their portfolio and also their visibility. So you see, there's a lot of competition, and as such, it's like a tug of war, the big dog eating the small dog and not really giving a chance. And even when the smaller dog is actually the one doing the most of the work, the local or national NGOs, they are being incorporated to do the work, and then they are actually receiving the very little funding, and even their overheads are not actually being met. And then they're not even enabling the local NGOs to recruit and maintain good quality staff, because to have high quality staff, good true professionals, you should be able to pay good salaries. So in many cases, you also see the INGOs poaching staff, good staff from the local NGOs to work for them. And then you have a lot of times the staff on the field are not being properly not given proper orientation. So you have not only for INGOs, so I don't want to just stick to INGOs. A lot of times the UN agencies are a major culprit to not actually enhancing localization. So you see, for instance, in Nigeria, the first allocation for 2021 for the Nigerian Humanitarian Fund, that's a country-based pool fund, was launched just a few weeks ago. And most of the funds always goes to the INGOs. So when I heard on this forum, and of course I know it's actually meant to be directed to local NGOs, but in Nigeria, the reverse is the case. It goes to the INGOs. And then because of the outcry and persistent advocacy, they now try to, because they actually blocked the barrier for local NGOs to be able to access the funds and to go through the screening process. When they eventually increase the number of local and national NGOs to be able to access the funds, then this year they suddenly said, they are coming up with the consortium approach. That's an excellent idea, consortium. But then there is a caveat: an INGO must be the lead in the consortium. And the INGO would have the larger chunk of the money in the consortium. So there are just 3 sectors that are being competed for: education, nutrition, and protection. So even if, let's say also, it would be one INGO leading 2 or 3 local NGOs. So even if the local NGO has better capacity and track record in what they are doing, the INGO must be the lead. And this was questioned. We had clinic sessions and we questioned this, and they said, so that the INGO can build the capacity. So what if my INGO is intervening in nutrition and that INGO is actually intervening in education and doesn't have much capacity in nutrition? Are they going to build the capacity of my organization in nutrition when we have track record of managing secondary health institutions on children with severe acute malnutrition? So you see, it's always targeted. It's like we take 1 step, 2 steps forward and 10 steps backward. Mm-hmm. And then you also have many of the UN agencies not doing proper partnership with subcon.
No, Nkese's voice is breaking, unfortunately. I don't think she will be right back, but what I take from her inputs so far is that, of course, the role of individual
for the local and national
workers,
NGOs. And then with that, cutting of the salaries and saying that, go to the overhead cost for people directly implementing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkese. I think, your voice was breaking a little bit, but I think I've got the main point, which is, of course, all the policies and nice aspirations that some, or I would say most of INGOs and also international organizations have to be trickled down to all of their teams and groups and the individuals and engaging with local NGOs all over the world. And I would try to highlight this also with you, Sema, and Ahmed. What's your experiences with the difference between the policies and the structures and aspirations on the one hand, but then the concrete interaction with some of your international NGO colleagues on the ground?
Maybe I can go first. In fact, I think I would like to paint a bit of a brighter picture on where we're going around this whole issue on localization. It's been on our agenda for many years now, since the World Humanitarian Summit, and already before the World Humanitarian Summit, in the build-up period, we came together as local organizations. We really talked about some of those challenges we had, and as we got together, we realized we all have, equally have the same challenges, no matter where we work. But with the World Humanitarian Summit and with the localization agenda coming out so strongly, I feel at least that there is that pressure for the international actors to kind of self-reflect and look at themselves and see how they can do things differently. I mean, I know that donors acknowledge that each layer of intermediary is an additional cost that takes money away from those who need it most. And in order to get better value for their money, and in order to make aid more effective, donors are in fact seeking ways of minimizing those layers of intermediaries and seeking alternative ways of doing things. For us in Turkey, for example, ECHO has launched a new program. It's called the LIFT program, where there's one intermediary, but then the funding goes out to local organizations only. And because ECHO is unable to directly fund local organizations, so they're looking for different ways of doing things. Similarly, with our INGO partners, they're really asking us to, to sit together, look at those complementarities, and looking at ways of doing things differently. And I think the fact that we have that on the agenda, that it's a strong message that everyone really genuinely is trying to do something. However, we've also come to realize that sitting at some of these global processes, on work streams and talking about the issue, that's important for sure. It's important because it keeps it on the agenda. But as local organizations, we've realized in the last a couple of years that unless we invest in our local leadership, unless we spend more of our time and energy in mobilizing ourselves as local actors, that we're not going to make progress, because it's only talk and it doesn't trickle down into practice. But what we've come to realize is that at the country level, we can actually make those changes. Talking concretely about, okay, these are the risks that we take. So what can we do to share some of those risks, or at least to be talking about some of those risks? And it's more at the country level in our day-to-day operations that we find ways of how we can do things differently. Because at the end of the day, donor rules and regulations are more at the principle level. But when you go down to the daily operations, there are always ways of finding ways of doing things differently. And that's why we have felt that at the country level, the more we invest in ourselves, in our local leadership, in our advocacy at the country level, we have in Turkey, for example, as Turkish NGOs that operate within the humanitarian system, we have our connections with the donors, with the INGOs, with the UN agencies. And it's interesting how they're very responsive when we do go to them and knock on their door and say, look, you've made commitments to localization. So these are some of our minimum standards that we expect as your local partners. And we actually have that space for dialogue is open, and we've been able to make quite some progress in terms of, sharing indirect budget lines, or covering some of our government liabilities that normally would not be covered by project funding. So it is, I feel that at the country level, the more we focus on that, the more progress we are making, because everyone is kind of, is interested in self-reflecting and looking at how they can do things differently.
Wow, thank you. It's highly interesting how all this comes together with regards to networking. Getting to know each other, engaging with each other, having rooms to have dialogue and be honest with each other, and actually have access to each other. And this might also tackle maybe one of the issues that we already raised today in the morning as well, namely the issue of trust. What we read in literature is that often INGOs that are hesitant to a more localized approach lack the trust towards their local partners. And so I would like to hear from you, other than networking and having had experience with working with local NGOs, what could also you maybe as a local NGO do to give INGOs and intermediaries this trust that you need for this eye-to-eye level of work? Ahmed, do you want to react?
Yeah. Thank you. First, in terms of, there are quite a number of challenges in all the spheres. However, I still feel that being the primary goal being a response to the affected populations, then there is a role for each of the different actors to really play. And this complementarity model layered in a way that we have a local lead will really work out better. So for example, the challenges we already see include the issue of the dilemma which most of the international organizations are facing, include the issue of their own internal agenda of Southern affiliates so that they balance out the organizations versus signing on to the localization commitments at the same time. This brings a dilemma within the system where they work. And in the end, you'll find some of them will definitely form affiliates in either Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa or a number of places in the south. And in that case, once that is done, the modality in which these affiliates are really created sometimes might not have been thought through very well, and they are top-down in nature. So they come to the same space of countries that are thought to be progressive, which are already middle-income countries. So once you come to that kind of an environment, and a thorough analysis was not done with the different partners that you already engage with, you'll find that then there will be overlap and the competition which you are hearing being discussed and described. From my perspective, what we have done in a middle-income country in like Kenya is to be able to step up our localization drive. So from that way, how we are doing it is we are creating this kind of networks. We are already creating these kinds of advocacy. Then we are sitting, now we have, since the December C4C AGM, we have a C4C working group in Kenya, which is locally led and co-shared by an international organization. So you see, these are positive things that are helping to go. The second other thing is we have come up with a localization framework agreement as local actors, so that then we have three key pillars to this. For example, we are calling it a readiness model. The readiness model is where local organizations take the leadership of capacity building, because we are the ones who wear the shoe, we know where it hurts and we want to have the improvement done, rather than the project-based capacity building model. And then this is linking it to a certification model, where now if a pool fund model is created in a space in Kenya, which will enable almost all the UN and all the donor and all the other international organizations to really give the 25% directly as possible to local actors, then the certification in the readiness model will be like towards this CHS, where now a due diligence is done through a tool that is signed on by almost the key partners who are like-minded, and then that is used to develop a certification process. You see, that now works out very well. Thirdly, what is inside it is the advocating for the localization agenda and bringing in the government on the table, such that then the preparedness and response model is based on a duty-bearer model, and the gap filling really works out well. So this push and going in that direction and giving that space, and the international organizations and the UN are ready to cede that ground of co-chair or chair and co-chair, then the ability to be able to be in the spaces required is possible. So I see a lot of light going forward. And now saying that 5 years of the grand bargain commitments is ended, and while we are starting off the real action in country, I see it a bit offshot. So it will be good that this is really worked out in the right way. We are starting to hit the tarmac now. It was talk, now we are hitting the tarmac. And there's time for us to really revisit the grand bargain very well and see it working in clusters, in a country localization framework processes and working groups, so that we really work it out better. Thank you.
All right. Well, it's great to hear how these networks are successful in communicating their readiness for working together. But I want to introduce another more critical thought, because I have the feeling that lots of local and national organizations often have to prove their readiness and capacity to work in a northern-based humanitarian system. So actually, I would love to see how new ways of thinking, innovative ways of doing things differently, could also find their way in the international and global humanitarian system, somehow also changing the way we are working together, and maybe also contextualize the way we are working together a little bit. So I'm wondering if you can share some final thoughts on how flexible your INGO and or international organizations partners are as intermediaries to non-traditional ways of doing things, to your contextualized way of working. And that will be my last questions before I will ask Nicoline to show us what she has put together on the graphic recording so far. So anybody from the panels, do you want to react? Sema wants to react, but I think...
Yes.
Yeah, now we are here.
Yes. Yeah, Darina, I just wanted to make a few comments. I think this issue of complementarity is very, very important. You also talked about maybe alternative ways of doing things. I mean, you know, there's a certain way, a conventional way of how we work with our international partners. But really, when we look at complementarity, when we look at what's really there, you know, we talk about capacity sharing, or we use capacity in a very limited sense.
Mm-hmm.
But there's actually so much wealth out there.
True.
And when we really sit and you know, as equals, you know, at the same table and talk about, well, what do you have to offer and what do I have to offer? And how can we best make use of that? For example, in our partnership with Diakoni Katastrophenhilfe, we have now formed working groups where there are colleagues from my organization and colleagues from DKH. And we sit together and we talk about capacity. Mm-hmm. You know, what does it mean for us and how can we work together? For example, we talk about surge capacity. We have gained so much experience as a partner, as a long-standing strategic partner of DKH. We have so much capacity, you know, human resource-wise, material-wise, contextualized, you know, interventions. So we look at how can we make use of that? Because at a time of crisis, Diakoni needs to step up, and they need to be able to respond. We have expertise here. You know, we talk about peer learning, south-to-south collaboration. Why can't we go to a neighboring country where we support, but just support the partners on the ground, not intervene ourselves, you know, not become operational ourselves, but how can we really share some of that learning, you know, we've gathered up to now? Or we have a working group on emergency preparedness. It's important that we're all prepared. For upcoming emergencies. Turkey is a high risk prone country, and you know, together with its neighbors. So looking at how can we together become better prepared, you know, in this partnership. Or we have a working group on localization. You know, we have a lot of good practices. We have things that we can share with others as inspiration. So we talk, you know, we spend time to talk about how we can better complement each other rather than just, you know, the conventional partner, donor, implementing partner kind of relationship. So I think that complementarity is really important. And when we do have that intention, when we do sit and try to and start listening to each other, Smurti talked about that in her opening session. We really need to have some of those sincere conversations. And when we do, you know, when we prioritize really, how can we create better impact? How can we create better value rather than how can I do more as an organization? Mm-hmm. How can I grow bigger as you know, mm-hmm. as X organization? Then you really start, you know, going into, you know, there are areas that opportunities that open up. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to invest a bit more time in getting to know each other and really putting in that time to see where our complementarities are.
Wow, there is a really bright horizon coming up. Now let us move to the studio of Nicoline. If Nicoline could share her screen and show us what she has put together so far. So we have talked about hindrances, trust, and flexibilities, and I think these are already three very important topics that we just raised here. If you want to discuss more, because we will not have time to talk a lot in the chat, please use our Slack channel. The Slack channel will be open also after the end of this panel. And having said that, I will ask my colleague Andrea to feed in what has going on in the chat so far. Again, please, we will just have the time to hear 2 or 3 voices from the audience. I'm sorry for that. But we will hopefully engage in Slack after the end of this panel. Andrea. Let me create some space. So,
thank you, Darina. The chat has been very lively again. I'm very happy to see that, and I think that this very important topic is also a good topic to discuss later on Slack. I have 3 clusters of questions that I will just spell out now and then present it to the panel. So the first question is on capacity building. The examples from Nkese were very useful, this person writes, in terms of describing some specific capacity building approaches, for example, INGOs inviting local partners to trainings, assisting or supporting on policy development. Are there other concrete examples like this? Questions for the whole panel that fall into the capacity building category and therefore do not fall into the, and this is probably the most important part of the question, not fall into the subcontracting category. The second question is a question on scale. Can an organization be at the same time a local national organization if when it's operating at home and an international organization when operating abroad? Does this double identity change its nature in terms of credibility, access to funding, capacity, etc., pp? And I think it links a little bit to what Smoothie posted in the chat. Who will fund the resources for going towards certification that has been discussed in the panel? Will the smaller local women-led organizations will be left out if we go to the compliance and certification route? And how will this be funded and resourced? I think this is a very present question. And the third question I would like to pose to the panel is from Adi Saidi, referring to Sema's talk. He writes, there's a chain of intermediaries or mediators between the primary donor and the people in need, quote unquote. And his questions are, first of all, how do the interests of these intermediaries translate to the process of localization? And secondly, then having that many intermediaries, what will be the cost of such a process and would that be effective then? It's on you to interpret the meaning of cost in this specific context.
Wow, Andrea, this is indeed a very diverse and lively discussion. Because we have just a little time left, I would proceed like letting all three of you choose to which question you want to respond and then go around and give all of you the opportunity to have a say on what was going on. So may I ask with you, Nkese, what is your take on the chat inputs?
Okay. On the chat input, I think Smoothie asked the question on national, local, international NGO. Well, since I work for a national NGO, I can't really answer that, but then I know that there are several INGOs that come into Nigeria and then they register as a Nigerian NGO and try to compete in the space. In fact, I think a few years back, there was actually an NGO from India that came to Nigeria, and though it's registered, and when they were asking for local NGOs, that was the NGO that was chosen, selected from the UN agencies to intervene. And there was a large outcry that this, even from its ownership structure, it's not even a Nigerian NGO, so how did it become a local NGO? But anyway, that's a topic for a different day. So I know it's been happening once it comes and registers, but the fact is that an INGO is an INGO. A national NGO is a national NGO, and a local NGO is a local NGO. And from my own perspective, Caritas Nigeria is a national NGO because we coordinate our own local network within. So we strengthen and we work with our local network to ensure, that's why we have that capillary network to be able to reach every nook and cranny of Nigeria, even places that are inaccessible to humanitarian aid. And so that's how we operate. But for being national, I know there are several, there are some national NGOs that are national in their country, say in the European, and then when they come to Nigeria, of course, they become an INGO. So it depends on where they're actually operating. Like a German NGO would be a national NGO in Germany, but when it goes to Kenya, for instance, it becomes an INGO. That would just be what I can say. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Nkese. And I think that relates to what I call open INGOization of local organizations, where international organizations come in from abroad and then take up a role as a local organization in certain contexts. But I think what I've learned not only today, but also from the literature, is that there is also what I call hidden INGOization, which I refer to as also genuinely local NGOs as being pushed into this international system, international way of working in order to make their voices heard. And I really hope that we will have more room for more diversity in the international system as we proceed with the localization agenda. Now, let me turn to you, Ahmed. What is your take on the questions in the chat?
Thank you very much. I will try and attempt two that are interlinked. One is the capacity, and the other one is about the financing to it, and something on the intermediaries and linking transactional costs together. So in capacity building, the way I look at it is the responsibility of each person to ensure the capacity is up and running. So so that we don't cry as local organizations to say that our capacity is always a key thing that is being used, then we need to step up to and for the purpose of now doing that, we're just calling it a locally led readiness model. So from that locally led readiness model, we do our own self-assessment. Then in our different lower level, the local partners that are in that area will be doing a peer kind of review on each other. Then each of the small organizations will have their own OCSs, organization capacity strengthening things. But jointly, whatever is common is brought up at a county level, which is at a subnational. And then the way we're looking at it is to tip the process of capacity building on its head in a way that we'll do an expression of interest of interested persons to join us up. So I don't know if I'm being heard, my internet is a bit unstable. So that way, then financing is easily going to be able to be identified. The second one is the certification is now for a higher level where there's going to be a pool fund where you need to compete for, then definitely a certification process must happen. So if a number of international organizations and the UN have agreed on a tool that can be used for due diligence for an independent person to do a due diligence on all the international local organizations who are ready, then that is done, and then a certification is done for the CHS. But that doesn't stop local organizations, international organizations who really want to still partner with as many small organizations to build their capacity as possible. But the process is to be able to own it up, wear the shoes well, and to be able to stand up for this claim of this ghost in the house called capacity building. The other one is about now intermediaries. There are some kinds of funds which local partners will definitely not be able to get. And now solidarity and working in complementarity with international actors will still be key and important. But if you look at the roles that will be played within that response, then they can be multiple and varied, and each of the local the partners and international can play different roles. And that way, then it really works. Because in the last response that I was telling you, where we did for locust response with the eco funding with the international partners, although one of them was the lead, the local partners network was on the table to be able to get into the discussions, to be able to push the agenda a bit further. And even in the time when funding was being received, we went to a layer where the geographical location identification was not left to the local partner. It was done through a key informants so that the bias is out of it. And then the key informants identified how many places are already having some response. And that's how locations to be targeted were identified. So you see compliance picked up. It was cash transfer, and therefore for compliance, local partners were paying it through an M-Pesa platform. But the payroll, the processes of the payroll was being countersigned and signed off by the international partners. And from that perspective, not a single issue was coming up because it was easy to be able to follow up, and release of funds was being done on a predicted days on the same time. And thereafter, an independent monitoring was being done by reach and impact were doing it. That consortium was led by ACTED, Oxfam, and Concern World were part of it. But in the end, a total of 8 local partners were partnered with, and even those partner organizations who are already operational have slowly taken the aspect of working with local partners as in the partnership. Now in the intermediary, where you can't pay without it, then it's essential. Where the other way can be done, where trusts and foundations can give direct funds to local organizations, and there are gaps within the consortiums local partners are forming, then international partners can still come in and then still bring in the international, the capacity and expertise they need. By the way, we piloted with some money that was available, how we can lower the transactional cost. So what happened was we agreed on a result-based model. So other than what was going to go to the programming and cash transfers, the rest was lump summed at 10%. So it was at the discretion of the local partners to be able to use that 10% the way they really wanted to use it, as long as the delivery of the results was right. And in the end, that was a way to look at whether transactional costs can be reduced if you work with local partners. And we have demonstrated it, and it has really worked.
Great sharing these experiences on finance and capacity. I think, at least myself, I learned a lot today. Thank you, Ahmed. Sema, your final take on the chat questions.
Thanks, Darina. On the question on scale, whether we're national or international, or whether this is a dual identity, I mean, our operations internationally, they have been very different from from conventionally how we define an overseas mission. We didn't go there, to start off a big operation, but together with our INGO partner, we actually looked at how we can help them expand their base of partners, their networks in countries and areas where they didn't have those connections. And they felt us as a strong enough partner to help them work with other partners and to build and to bring them to a certain capacity. Like I said, I mean, in this working group we have with Diakoni, these are precisely the kind of discussions that we're having. Diakoni already has quite a wide base of partners, local partners. So looking at how we can learn from each other and what we can do to support them more as a one-on-one support, rather than the conventional, trainings that go under capacity trainings, quick in and out, and trainings that don't leave any impact, but working with them one-on-one. So for us, becoming international was for a different purpose. So in that sense, we don't necessarily see ourselves as an international organization in that sense. And then the question on the intermediaries, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but maybe just a few more examples of where I see this issue of reducing, the layers of intermediaries being an important question. In Turkey, for example, there are many UN agencies that work with local partners, and all of them now work only with local partners. So they don't have the INGO intermediary that you would normally see, a UN agency working with an INGO, and then sometimes that INGO working with the local partner, because they've acknowledged that there is that capacity. There is a relatively stronger, civil society, and there are stronger institutions. And they have made that choice. It's a part of their localization strategy to work only and directly through local organizations. And what we're practicing now with UNHCR, for example, is what we have called an umbrella model, because we work with refugees. We've been working with them for many years, and there are quite a lot of refugee-led organizations also in Turkey. Mm-hmm. And UNHCR would like to reach out to them, would like to work with them. So they have asked us whether we could be that intermediary, that channel, to reach out to them and to work with them, again, in the same way, to work with them one-on-one, mm-hmm. and to support them as they go along. So they do the implementation, it's their program. But we're there, to see how we can support them in different ways. So this umbrella model is something new that we're testing with the UN, for example. Again, this is a model with our INGO partners that we're looking into, saying, how can we, for example, at the regional level, capitalize on some of that learning that we've done and that peer-to-peer. So these are all, I think, new discussions and new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things. I think that really contribute to stronger local actors, to a stronger local civil society at the country level. And yeah, so these have been some of our experiences.
Wow, well.
Can I add just one?
Yeah,
just one,
please.
One bit. Sorry. I wanted just to add in the aspect of local partners. There are two key things that are very important. A local organization will definitely share capacity. Why? Because they don't have the unrestricted budgets to really keep even the cost ups. So if you're going to have a project-based model in financing local capacity so that then tomorrow we still want the capacity to really remain, then we really have to have some administrative costs put into the funding that they receive. Secondly, if you're having strategic partnerships, then like any other organization, an organization is only an organization when the support structures are there. Finance is there, local logistics is there, HR is there, and the senior management is there. That is not normally put in project proposals. So how are they going to be able to keep that capacity? That needs to be really thought through. And so from that kind of perspective, you will find international and UN organizations entering into project-based contracts with the organizations. And as at the end, they say you have been given 40% now, you bring back paperwork, another 40, and then until the project is completed, maybe 20% or 10% is withheld. Where will that local partner get the 10% unless they're going to bring pending bills as supporting documentation? So from that perspective, my rallying call will be there's need for unrestricted budgets to help them do this. There'll be need for administrative costs. And if at all any money is being withheld while a project is being implemented, not for the project inputs, but for any other. So the administrative costs can be held until the end or something like that. So that will be my parting thought on that. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I think it's very important that we have to consider also the other capacities than ready offices, etc., but also maybe access to certain groups and take it from there and help local NGOs that do have access to work on those areas where they still need to improve. And I think it's also very interesting what Sema just had said, how the umbrella model is really putting leading national and local organizations into the driving seats of building the capacities of their fellow peers. Because up to now, we mostly think that this is mostly a nice topic and a nice area where international organizations could move into as they are pulling out of operational humanitarian work on the ground. So that's really challenging that perception. Thank you, Sema, for sharing that. Before I want to give you all a final 1 minute, 1.5 minute, please wrap up opportunity. Let us have a look into the studio of Nicolene again. Nicolene, could you share your screen again and tell us what you have taken from our conversation so far? So maybe we can use this screen as a start off for the 2 minutes wrap up for our panelists. So other than hindrances to a more localized approach and flexibility and trust that we've been discussing so far, we now also talked about capacity and the intermediary role, especially when it comes to funding and access. Right, okay, let's have a look at those a little bit. And dear panelists, may you maybe also keep these in mind when you now react and give us your final take before we close the session. And Nkese, may I start with you giving us maybe some final thoughts on what we should take with us when we are rethinking the new roles of intermediaries in a localized humanitarian system. What do you want us to remember and maybe to do?
Okay, thank you very much. The new role of INGOs, I would say, should tilt more towards technical assistance of the national and local NGOs so that they can actually be able to do their programming well, perhaps when it is needed, and also be like going to capacity sharing, linkages to resources, especially those restricted resources that the local or national NGOs can't easily access. So the INGOs could be like linkages to such pool of funds and help in when proposals are being developed. If the local or national NGO requires assistance for you to look through, that could be a source. It could also be monitoring. Perhaps they could take on the role of monitoring, not monitoring to penalize, but monitoring to ensure improvements in service delivery to the vulnerable population. We can also talk about accompaniment if the local or national NGO so requires, so that they can build their institutional capacity. We can also look at sharing even of resources, because like in Nigeria, for instance, the INSO, which is the INGO Security Forum, some INGOs do share that information. Even when we try to register with INSO for several years, the INGO Forum says, no, you can't register to get such security information. It's only for INGOs. And an INGO just flies into the country the next day and they're allowed to register. And meanwhile, they're operating in Nigeria. I think such things should be cut. Also looking at the HCT, that's the national and the humanitarian country team. The HCT in Nigeria, it's depleted, or we don't have the voice of the national and local NGOs. In an institution where you have seats for 6 INGOs, in fact 7, because even the director of the INGO Forum belongs there. And then you also have the INGO Forum even actually struggling for funds with local NGOs, funds actually sourced by local NGOs, and they go to the funder and say, oh, let's administer the funds, and then they begin to micromanage. That is counter-localization. Such things should be stopped. And then, of course, the UN agencies, it would be good. There are several UN agencies that are actually very good when they have staff that understand what localization and good partnership is. That's when you can actually see localization in action. But where in a situation where you have staff that don't actually understand good partnership, then it becomes counterproductive. You see the UN agencies actually stifling and actually going into the politics and even religious inclination and trying to sideline especially faith-based agencies from competing because they are listening to gossips and not actually doing what they are supposed to do. And you have some of their staff actually being very high-handed to the local NGOs and talking down on them. I think there should actually be like a forum or links where you can post concerns that are being exhibited by UN staff so that they can actually be sanctioned and the right things should be done. I think there should be joint assessments between the INGOs, the UN agencies, and of course the local NGOs. It's actually going on currently in Nigeria in some clusters where you have joint monitoring and joint assessments of projects. I think that should be encouraged. Of course, the accompaniment that we've talked about, capacity sharing. There's a lot of capacity in Nigeria and in other countries that should be richly tapped into, because in fact, when most INGOs come in, it is still the local staff that are being employed. That's the capacity. So I don't see the capacity don't just fly into the country. The capacity was there. All you need to do is to share the capacity and do exchange of information. That's how you become better and bigger. There should also be visibility for what the local and national NGOs are doing in country. And you don't just take the glory and go and write glowing papers as if you were the one that actually did the legwork. So those are a few of the things based on the limited time. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkese. Now we are actually already running over our time, so may I ask the remaining two of you be very brief. Ahmed, what are your key takeaways in a nutshell?
Thank you. First of all, I want to make it clear that it's not a total gloom situation. The grand bargain has really contributed to some improvements. And my first take will be there's really need to be a mindset change and internal organizational changes so that what is being preached at headquarters is being walked at county level. Secondly, we should push the local humanitarian leadership concept. Let's have locally led as the keyword in preparedness and response, in capacity, in advocacy, and in full funds of financing. And everything will be much better and we'll be able to reach the disaster-affected communities much better.
Thank you. That has been very brief. I appreciate that. Sema, can you make it as brief as well?
I'll try, Darina. I guess my strongest message would be for INGOs to look at how they can move from being an implementer to being a facilitator. Mm-hmm. There are, I think, a lot of different ways that INGOs, they have their added value, but for them to kind of look over what that means and to perhaps assess themselves. As in terms of their role in humanitarian response. And there are plenty of different ways, that they can act as a facilitator. They can explore ways of working through consortia of local organizations. Like in the example I gave, the umbrella model, they can use one of their stronger partners to reach out to, other smaller NGOs that need strengthening. With one of our partners, with our INGO partners with TDH Germany, we have a partnership where they are only helping us build our capacity in child safeguarding because we have a child protection program. So they're just there to build capacity there, and we don't have an operational a partnership. So there are different ways, and I think it's important for INGOs to kind of look at what those might be. And I'm really appreciative of the fact that in my partnerships with INGOs, the first 16 years of my career, that empowering partnership has precisely made us a strong organization, that we do this kind of advocacy. Mm-hmm. And we're able to we're able to seek different ways of doing things. And I think investing in those local leadership skills is definitely worth, and it will go a long way. So just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Sema, especially also for sharing these good practices and good experiences which other NGOs and other international organizations might take as an example to move in the same or similar directions. All I have left to say now is a big thank you to all of you. It has been a pleasure to be your host today. I've learned a lot. And also thank you for the audience and also the panelists to be very patient with us, having technical issues in the beginning. I hope you enjoyed the panel no matter what. And I would love to see you all engage in Slack now to move on with the discussion and maybe even network among each other. And as we have now heard that networking and contacts and room of discussions are so important, I would highly encourage using that opportunity. I have to close this panel for now, but we will have 2 more blocks of our CHAR conference coming up tomorrow. So I hope you are still as excited as I am to hear more of the Grand Bargain and related issues. Tomorrow we will discuss the donor side, especially finance issues, and also we will have the opportunity to have 3 spotlights feeding in what we find cross-cutting issues like gender, innovation, and also the underlying ethics of the humanitarian reform, which we find equally important. Thank you for being patient here with us. Thank you to the CHA team behind the scenes making this work nonetheless. And I hope that we will all see each other tomorrow. Goodbye for now.